Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. It has been a little while since I've recorded a booktube. Life has been a bit crazy. I had a week where I had a few migraines. A bunch of health type things just kind of prevented me from recording the way I would have liked to. I am drinking tea again today. This is actually from this morning, and it's nighttime. I kept it on a warmer and just sort of forgot about it. This is Irish breakfast. Oops. There we go. Sorry, my phone started buzzing. Probably would be better if it was still fresh, but it will do. Don't like Irish breakfast quite as much as I remember liking it in the past. Like English afternoon a lot better, which is what I had yesterday. Anyway, this particular video is going to be focusing on the fiction books that I've read and have been reading and plan to read. Then I'll do another one which will come out a little bit later, which will be on the nonfiction. Just try to split things up a little bit so I don't do the videos quite as long. I actually am going to, because I tend to run quite long and not to have any idea of how long I run. So if I have, there we go, stopwatch going, I have a general idea of how long I'm running so I don't bore people to tears. Okay, so first things first, March Mystery Madness wrap-up. And that actually might be what I focus on mostly here, is I did not read most of the books that I had planned to read. I think last time I had said, let me just take a look at my notes, that I would read And Then There Were None, Endless Night, and Three-Act Tragedy for Agatha Christie. And I said that I would read Death of a Fool by Neil Marsh. Thank you for the pronunciation assistance to Fonda Books. Murder's Mistake by E.C.R. Lorac. And The House in Charlton Crescent by Annie Haynes. Okay, I read none of those last three books. Yeah, failed big time there. For the Agatha Christie, I read 2 out of 3, so that wasn't bad. Just haven't gotten around to Endless Night. Oh, I was also supposed to be reading The Pricking of My Thumbs, The Mystery Mile. So, Pricking of My Thumbs, that's another Agatha Christie, another Tommy and Tuppence. Mystery Mile by Marjorie Allingham. The Floating Admiral by the Detection Club. And The Holy Thief by Alice Peters. Yeah, none of those got read either. I did finish Secret Adversary, though, which has always been a book that I enjoy. So I did finish reading The Tower of Treasure by Franklin Dixon. That's a Hardy Boys book. I enjoyed rereading the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew books. Glad I chose the first 2 novels. Glad I didn't pick up a ton more of them. Just not something I could see myself reading a lot of in the future. They're good for what they are, but just not something that I would go out of my way to read. Nice little books, but you can definitely tell that they were aimed for a younger audience. And there's a lot of leaning on description in a way that would not be done now. And except if maybe you're aiming for a younger audience, which you see. There's a lot more of telling versus showing. So they will say, and also it's a very omniscient point of view. So, for example, to use Nancy, you might be alone with Nancy in a car, but it'll say the pretty girl, blah, 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 blah. Well, Nancy's the only one present. Is Nancy thinking of herself as a pretty girl? And this will run throughout. It's an omniscient point of narrator. I don't particularly care for the omniscient narrator. I usually prefer to be having sections in particular characters' points of view. Now, Agatha Christie will sometimes slip into a omniscient point of view, but usually she's pretty consistent, where she will keep to one person's point of view, or she might head hop a bit, but it's not like you have the omniscient unknown narrator usually. Um, so that's just not a writing style I'm particularly fond of. So that's probably why I won't be reading a whole lot of either the Party Boys or Nancy Drew. Just not a preferred writing style for me. I did reread And Then There Were None. I had remembered most of it. That's one that you don't really forget. I think that's one that you don't necessarily need to reread a lot. Now, I do. That is one that you could say she didn't play by the fair play rules because she really did. You couldn't have figured it out on your own, I don't think. I think that's one that definitely did not play by the fair play rules. You were missing information in order to come to the deduction yourself. Now, I really enjoyed the other one I read by her during this period of time, The Three-Act Tragedy. I did figure out who did it. This was actually my first time reading it, which was a little surprising because I'm a huge Agatha Christie fan. But I figured out before the end who did it. I just couldn't quite figure out all the why. I even figured out, I don't mean I couldn't figure, his motive was the sticking point for me. But I could see how he had the means. I could see how his person has skills. So for me, I figured out the person, just not the why. And usually I don't figure out the murderer by the end, so I was really kind of pleased that I did this time, even though it was more of a gut feel than it was an actually fully logicked. Well, it was partially logicked because I did base it off of who had certain skills. So yeah, I did really enjoy that one. It was nice to have a Poirot mystery I hadn't actually read before. Then after that point, this was when I threw all my plans out the window for what books I was supposed to be reading. I had a bit of a rough week last week. And when I have a rough week, I do one of two things. I had a bit of a rough week the past couple. For the week before that, I'd had migraines, and then this past week was just rough. So I tend to do one or two things when I'm having a rough time. If I have a migraine or something, if I just am so very fatigued, I will read a lot of history books because it doesn't require a whole lot of energy for me. It's just a way to occupy my mind without putting a whole lot of effort myself. So that's usually if I'm having migraines or a lot of fatigue, I will read history books. Now, if I'm feeling sad or just not in the greatest mood, then I go to Agatha Christie. And I don't just go to any Agatha Christie. I tend to reread my favorites, which is what happened last week. And that meant that I was reading one after another, after another, after another, after another. Because I can read easily 2 or 3 Agatha Christie's in one sitting. And part of why, this is such a silly reason to be in a bad mood, but part of why I was in a bad mood last week is it was actually book related. I had picked up on recommendation from another channel. I picked up on sale, so it wasn't too big of a deal in that way. It was a book called Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, and it sounded really good. And this person who recommended the book also is very character oriented, the way I am. If you could give me a great plot, but if I don't connect with the characters, you've lost me. And I read the Amazon blurb, and I was really intrigued by the characters. Already I was invested. I made it, now this book was over 800 pages long. I made it almost halfway through the book, not a little more. And, okay, I'm not someone who enjoys visual sex scenes in my books. That's not what I come to read. So when I came upon what looked like it was going to be a continuing theme of these coming up in this book, I had to return the book. I was very disappointed because I was very invested in these characters. Still invested. I think about them still. But it was ruining my reading experience to have these things continually come up. So it's unfortunate because this author is an amazing writer. She creates a wonderful world. You get really invested in her characters. But if, like me, you don't necessarily want in-depth sexual scenes in your books, this might not be the book for you. But because I made it so far through the book, I probably should have stopped it sooner when I ran into the first issue, but I was hoping it was a fluke. So I was already very invested in the characters, and yeah, so I was in a bad mood when I returned the book. So I remedied that by binge reading Agatha Christie books, particularly ones that I really loved, just to sort of ease my disappointment. So the ones I did I started with the Labors of Hercules. Actually, okay, I always say Labors of Hercules because his name is Hercule Poirot, but it's actually the Labors of Hercules. Or I guess if you go with the Greek pronunciation is, which is Heracles, because something like Joy of Hera or something of Hera, because they were the mom was trying to basically like bribe Hera not to kill her son because Hera hates all the offspring of Zeus that don't belong to her, and hates, all the poor women that Zeus ravishes. Wow, you can tell I've been reading a lot of history books because I use the term ravish. Okay, anyway. So, yeah, that's why I pronounce... Anyway, going on. So, I read the Labors of Hercules by Agatha Christie, and I forgot how fun these are. The reason I like this particular short story collection is because they're definitely short stories, but they're connected to each other to make a larger narrative. The stories are self-contained insofar as the mysteries don't help solve each other. Like the first one, which is the Nemean Lion, doesn't help you solve the one about the Aegean stables. Aegean stables? Yeah. Okay. But doesn't help you solve that. But they're related insofar as Poirot's choosing these mysteries so that they somehow in his head relate to all the labors of Hercules. So I enjoyed that particular device to connect all the shared stories. Wow. Sorry about that, brain. All the short stories, not shared stories, although they had a shared theme. So I found that quite fun. I did enjoy that two of the stories were connected besides the overall theme of labors. Two of them used... Okay, so one later on used a character that was introduced in the Nemean Lion mystery. And I forget which mystery that... which labor it was that brought back this particular character. And I wish I could remember because it had to do with the second mystery had to do with someone who created his own religion and was then convinced. Then these older ladies would like write him as beneficiary of the whale, and they would all die, although it was seen from natural causes. I can't speak. But I can't remember which labor that was. So, yes, that was enjoyable. Oh, before I continue on the rest of my Agatha Christie spiel, I always forget to say this to the end, so I'm going to say it now while I'm thinking about it. If you also enjoy knitting and hearing someone ramble forever, I also have a knitting podcast. That's with my mom. We are Pinnacle Needles Podcast. We're also on YouTube. We call ourselves a podcast. We are a YouTube podcast, videocast, YarnTube, whatever. We've been doing a knitting, crocheting podcast for going on 10 years. So that's my little plug. There is a link, I think, in the description and then elsewhere on my channel. Okay, back to our program. Okay, so then the next one I reread was Death in the Clouds. And it was a little bit, it was easier for me to pick out the clues this time that pointed to who the murderer was, now that I knew what I was looking for. So she did do the fair play for that one. And I did enjoy, I think what I enjoyed about this particular one is something, it was different than some of her others insofar as Agatha Christie has a tendency, when she writes young female characters, to have them be a tuppence type character, which is adventurous, a bit impulsive. That is her tendency, that is her preferred young female character type, it seems. But in Death in the Clouds, you then had Jane Grey. Yes, who has the same name as the one-time Queen of England for like a couple days, a couple hours. I can't remember how long Jane was queen before Mary took her place in the succession. But in Death in the Clouds, that this particular Jane Grey, she is, while she can think on her feet when she needs to, she is very common sense, very matter of fact. She's not going to be like Tuppence running with, flights of fancy. And I think I like that about Jane, because she isn't quirky. She's a bit different in that way for an Agatha Christie younger heroine, and I find that a bit refreshing. So I think that because of that, I rather like Jane. I want to say that she has a similar character in The Hollow. Not the artist, the young girl who works in, I think it's a dressmaker shop. I always liked her too, even though I can't remember her name. So that was Death in the Clouds. I was able to enjoy the characters a bit more this time and also pick up on clues. Cat Among the Pigeons. Even though Poirot comes in very late in this one, I enjoyed this one, even though it shows a mixture of Agatha Christie's love for the spy genre that she tried to bring in her other books with, varying degrees of success. And then her natural gift for mystery writing. Or, I'm not going to say just natural, her gift for mystery writing, because I'm sure she worked very hard at it. It's not like she just woke up one day and like, there's a plot. She actually had to work at it. But Cat Among the Pigeons, I really enjoy the characters in this story. And what brings me back again is not just the teachers. I love the way she writes the young girls, particularly, I think her name is it Julie? I believe it's Julie. It's one of the two J's. You have Jennifer and the other one. I like the way she writes the kids, because they're a bit young for the normal young female characters that she'll write. Usually she has her characters be anywhere from like 17 to early 20s when they're her young lead females. But these young girls were, I think they're about 13 to 15, somewhere in that range. And these were good characters. You had the ones who were a bit oblivious, you had the ones who noticed more, and they felt like they were fully formed characters. So even though Poirot came a little bit late in this, I really did enjoy this one. This is also the first time we see Mr. Robinson, who shows up later in Passenger Frankfurt, although he's not used to his full advantage. Not because she didn't write him as well, but because Passenger to Frankfurt was a bit of a dumpster fire. Not that's bad. It was not one of her best story-wise. Although it does have some of the characters that were introduced in this book. Then I read Five Little Pigs, which again, if you want something about character, this one was it's an exercise in point of view, because you are looking at a murder mystery from 5 people's point of view looking back. And of course you always have the concern that people might be lying or remembering things wrong, but you're looking at the same incident from 5 different points of view. So it is really a great look at how people see things differently, how people's prejudices can affect how they translate things, how time can affect how they see things. It actually is it can kind of give you an idea how witness testimony can be faulty, because people remember things wrong, or they can, and without intending to lie. This is just how they remember it. Now, granted, in this case, I think it was like 15 years later, if that much. So again, you have a bigger time gap, but you also had people's prejudices affecting how they saw things. So that's really what makes Five Little Pigs particularly interesting. And then Sad Cypress. Sad Cypress, this is one that, it's not one of my favorites of hers. I thought that your main female character in this was interesting. She was a little bit different, again, from most of the younger female characters in Agatha Christie writes. She's not like a Jane Grey, but she's not a tuppence either. She's interesting. You really do have to read Sad Cypress to get a good grip on the main female character. Not going to say a whole lot about that because she really is the crux to the story. I like the character a lot who brings this mystery to Poirot's attention. He was a very good character. And I'm already running longer than I intended. I will just end this on my to be read, and then I'll start a new video for my nonfiction. But I have on my to be read something called, besides the ones I told you about previously, immediately to be read. I have planned for myself the Thinking Machine Mysteries. I figured that would be a pretty quick read. The reason I chose the Thinking Machine Mysteries, and these are by Jacques Futrelle. This gentleman, and part of why I picked his name up was I was reading a book on the Titanic, and I'll be talking about that more in the history book video I'm doing. But Jacques Futrelle was on the Titanic, and he didn't make it off. He walked his wife to the lifeboat, and then he died on the Titanic. She, from what I understand, did a lot to get his mysteries out there after his death. So I was interested in reading what he wrote, and from what I understand, he's kind of a little step between like Sherlock Holmes kind of detective and the Poirot kind of detective. So I'm interested in seeing what the Thinking Machine Mysteries are like. And initially I was going to read A Death of a Fool by Neil Marsh next, but I went ahead and I snagged the first book in her Inspector. I think it's Roderick Allen, I think his name is. mysteries. So I decided to read the first one first, A Man Lay Dead, and then I don't care what order I read it. I just want to meet this character in his first book. So that is the first one I'll read. And I'm not sure if I'll start with The Thinking Machine or A Man Lay Dead. But I will now try to work through those books that I told you I was going to work through. I really enjoyed March Mystery Madness. Now for me, because I do like mystery books, they are a comfort read to me. I will probably continue. It's not going to change my reading terribly much. I will still be reading mystery books. But I did enjoy March Mystery Madness. I have a feeling that's going to be something we're looking forward to. I am grateful for Too Fond of Books bring up some books that I was interested in. She's the one who mentioned the double feature type books where it has 2 novels in it. One of them was, I found and got a deal on, it's a guy who writes Nero Wolfe. He had a couple of 2-for-1 books for Nero Wolfe. What I also wanted to pick up, and I didn't, if it's still available, I might have to, because the concept was interesting. So the same author is the one who wrote Nero Wolfe. But it's a double mystery insofar as you've got, I think it was like 2 motives, 2 murder weapons, 2 victims. It was like 2, but all one mystery. And it intrigued me because it worked for the 2x2. Now, I didn't get to it, but it's an idea. It still intrigues me. I might have to pick it up regardless and read it at some point. But it's not one of his Nero Wolfe mysteries. It's Timush. I don't know how to pronounce the character's name. It's T long name for the first name. So I hadn't picked that up. I had picked up Nero Wolfe instead. But I hope to eventually read that other one too. Anyway, I said I was going to end so I can go on to the nonfiction video. This was a bit rambly this time. I still haven't quite figured out what my format is going to be for these. I also haven't figured out how not to ramble. But I guess that'll come. If you were able to stick this out, thank you very much for joining me. I'm hoping to have at least read The Thinking Machine Mysteries and A Man Lay Dead by the next time that I see you. And maybe to get some further reading on The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. Sorry, my brain just died half a second. And finish reading Pride and Prejudice for the 20 millionth time. Okay, going on to record my nonfiction video. I will see you then. Bye.